Welcome to the webinar, Design Reinvention, Hospitality, Hotel Interiors, Reimagining Spaces. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. This is the 6th in the series of Design Reinvention virtual events that we've been running. We've been in the bar, we've been in the tent, we've been on the zoo, we've been on the farm, and today we're back in the hotel and we're looking at designing spaces, post-COVID spaces, and we've got some great people who are going to be discussing that with us shortly. Just quickly before we start, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please ask all the questions that you want to ask during the session. As they come to you, just ask them, and we will run all those at the end after the presentations. The session is being recorded, and a link will be sent to you about an hour after we finish, and that'll also include the presentations that you can download and re-look at to your heart's content. Right, we're going to get going. And first up, we have White Jacket, the principal of White Jacket, Patricia Ho Duven. Patricia, over to you, please.
Thank you, David. I'm going to start sharing my screen right now. Okay, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. So just quickly run through White Jacket. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Patricia Ho Duven. I'm the principal and founder of White Jacket. White Jacket is a studio headquartered in Singapore. We specialize in hospitality and F&B projects. We have an office in Bangkok as well as in Cebu. So we started the company in 2010. So this year is our 10-year anniversary. So we look back and we have worked on almost 4,500 guest rooms. And among this, about, I would say 30–40% are renovation projects. I think that's why I'm invited to talk about renovation today. So quickly run through our ongoing projects. Currently, we're working on a ski resort for the Winter Olympics 2020, a Rosewood Hotel in China, Intercontinental in Bangkok, Intercontinental Hotel in Nanjing. One of the highlights of our project, which I'm very happy to share later, is the Kimpton Bali. It's actually a conversion of the legendary Amanusa. So that's a very exciting project. And another project, which is actually a conservation project, is the Langham in Colombo. So we are conserving a 300-year-old building and turning it into a hotel. So next up is the completed renovation projects. We have completed the New World Hotel in Makati, JW Marriott South Beach, Nomi Hotel in Singapore. All these renovated hotels has won many international design awards, which we are very happy with. So let's talk about renovation. I think just like many of you, I used to think that renovation projects are full of constraints, old and outdated. Simply put, just not sexy. But when I started White Jacket, I was looking to gain an impressive portfolio fast and experience fast. The thing is, new projects usually take so much longer to complete. So and I also started White Jacket during the economic crisis. So there seemed to be many renovation projects available. So I took the chance, I took them on. And once I started working on these projects, I really started to like it. First and foremost is the challenge, because with all the constraint of space, volume, budget, and time, as a designer, you have to think out of the box. You have to be creative, and most importantly, you have to be original. And the satisfaction to witness a transformation of an undesirable property, because normally when the renovation is gonna start is because it has dragged to the point there's no return. So from that moment until it becomes something dazzling and new, that's very exciting. So I think one of the point of renovation project is the advantage of a renovation is that you could put the most relevant, a trend-setting hotel in a very short time. Because like I said, new projects take a long time to build, and sometimes it became irrelevant because it took so long. But for renovation, you could really make it good and make it a trend-setting property. So I would like to share some of our renovated projects with you. Picture says 1,000 words. So this is really old, jaded. It doesn't smell good as well when we started. This is the new wall in Makati. This is one of the first projects we took on when I started White Jacket. So very quickly, I started White Jacket in 2010. We were commissioned probably around end of 2010. By 2012, we see a dazzling new lobby. At that time, the new wall is also going through a rebranding. So it was a very exciting time. We worked together. We kind of just merged all these processes together. And this was the guest room before, loving the rug. And then that's the renovated version, which we won many awards for these suites as well. The next project is a different sort of property, is a boutique hotel in Singapore. So this is before renovation. The model is more like a service apartment. Therefore, there's a big bedroom and a living room. It's about 38 square meter. And the owner decided to increase the room count. So we basically cut the room into half. And then we have like an 18 square meter room, but with the same high level of luxury. So when we took on this challenge to create small luxury hotel with very small room, so we have to again think out of the box. For this case, we sort of explode the bathroom and then make the vanity a feature so that this whole bathroom, 5 fixtures bathroom still work beautifully. And until today, maybe a few months ago before the outbreak, Nomi has remained as one of the top design hotels in Singapore and in Asia. So the next one is actually JW Marriott in Singapore, South Beach. So it's also went through a rebrand. At that time, the property was rebranded from South Beach to JW Marriott South Beach. And at the same time, JW is going through a rebrand itself. So they wanted to put a new spa on the guest room floor. So this is actually a guest room floor. It's at the lower floor, level second floor, and all the shafts, as you can see in blue, we have to keep them, and all the core and all the structure. And we inherited a very long and narrow corridor. So what do we do here? We really push ourselves. So we thought of introducing this wind blowing gesture. So this wind blowing signifies transformation. So therefore the layout and everything is very fluid. With this concept, we could create public open spaces, more private spaces, and very private treatment. So that's how we approach our projects, facing the constraints head on and really be creative about it. So if I were to summarize renovation projects based on our experiences, it would be, the key points would be, number one, positioning. If the owner has a very clear vision and idea, I think that is very important. Secondly, a strong design and a good branding. Third is properly managed budget. And I think fourth is well-managed timeline. And more often than not, these 4 points always running in tandem. They are going at the same time, running at the same time always. So I would recommend to any owner listening, looking forward to renovate their properties, you should engage professional consultant team fast, from QS, architect, ID, M&E, everyone at the same time. This will ensure you a smooth running and a good project. So the next I'm gonna share is, this is most relevant. This is a case study. So let's talk about Kimpton and this transformation of Kimpton. So it used to be Aman Hotel. Aman, everyone knows Aman, everyone loves it. This legendary hotel has been there for like almost 30 years. It was designed by the late Carrie Hill. But Kimpton, on the other hand, has a completely different energy. It's for like younger, different clientele. So this project presents to us a lot of challenges. The architecture is beautiful and inspiring, but it does look tired. This is the villa. So instead of like tearing it down from the get-go, we know that we want to actually reawaken the soul, re-energize this property rather than taking everything down. It's also a more sustainable way. It's faster to renovate, and of course, in terms of budget, it's way more manageable. So keeping the property, we infuse it with the inspiration of an understanding of local culture. Bali is blessed with so much craft, history, so we wanted to bring all these layers into the guest experience. By doing so, we could attract a new breed of client. They are fun, they're young, they're quirky, and they look forward to different experiences. They look for that special moments. So for the villas, we actually kept all the villas. We're adding a few new villas somewhere. But for this villa, for example, we kept the entire structure of the villa. This is a soft refurbishment. So we used interior design, furniture, soft finishing to give it a different look and feel. For example, upon arrival, today we have this Instagrammable moment. So when you come into the terrace, that's when your wow starts. And when you go into the room, it's very bespoke. Experience is all tailored. Within the room, we have a mini bar that it changes with time. In the morning, it will be kombucha, jamu, something fresh and nourishing. When it comes to the evening, it turned into a craft cocktail bar. So it gives guests a very special experience when they're in the room. For another type of villa, we thought, let's have this villa an upscale version of the standard villa so that the owner can charge more. So what we do here is we retain all the structure. We move the wall inwards. So then the guests enter through a covered living room before they enter to the room itself. So again, by doing very little adjustment, we changed the experience and we added the pool there. So this gives owner the opportunity to have different level of villa and set them at different selling point without tearing down again all the structure. So the architecture of the public space, they are like huge, but very linear and flat. So for what we wanted to create is to create a new experiences as you enter to the hotel. So we start by provoking emotions. So when you enter to the arrival, we wanted them to have that moment of pause, so they stop, they experience the space. As they move on to the lobby, it's about connection. So we have an artist studio where we invite artists to come in and share their stories. So that's discovery. Next to it, there's a retail space that sparks joy. So then you learn something and you go buy something. And the signature bar, which at the end is called the gong bar. So we wanted that space to generate vibration for the entire property. And then for the restaurant audio dining, we call that the savory. So we want tasteful food to really make you salivate. So from the beginning, we knew that we look around Bali that, in terms of resort, they are quite the same. So we knew that we want to do something completely different, especially in Nusa Dua, where it's surrounded by Ritz-Carlton, St. Regis, such hotels. So we wanted a bare feet luxury. We want to redefine what is luxury resort in Bali and in Nusa Dua. I think we have succeeded at. So I'm gonna share a little bit more on what is the design process, like transforming something old to new. So for the destination bar, it's called the gong bar. So instead of just literally put gong everywhere, we wanted to celebrate the ritual of making the gong. So when we study further, actually to make a gong, it takes a lot of processes from ceramic to the metal. So fire is one of the main elements. So within the bar itself, we have a terrace and a fireplace. So what happened is in the evening, every day at 5, 6 p.m., the GM will sound the gong, and that is actually a signal to invite all the guests to come to the lobby, to the bar, to enjoy their signature Kimpton cocktail moment and enjoy the sunset. So we use these ideas to kind of synchronize with how the hotel could operate. And the next one would be the all-day dining. So the idea here is really about nourishing a local lady who has healing hands, who's very good with food. So this restaurant is all about residential approach. And also we have a big landscape. So we talk about a lot about farm to table, authentic, very honest food. Actually, I have another project to talk about, but I think I'm running out of time. So I'm gonna stop right here. So thank you. I look forward to any questions later.
Patricia, thank you. God, absolutely fascinating. Transforming existing spaces. The Aman, God, I mean, what a challenge taking that one on. Turning into something truly exceptional. Fantastic work. Thank you. Right, we're moving on to Nigel Harris. Nigel Harris is a managing director of Grey Matters, based in Bangkok, and is going to be talking about the post-COVID rooms. Nigel.
Okay. Hi, everybody. And greetings to all from Bangkok. Just get the presentation moving. Okay, maximize that. Just bear with us a second. Here we go. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. We all certainly find ourselves in strange and disorienting times. Nothing is more impacted at the moment, I guess, than travel, tourism, and hospitality. And in Thailand, we know all about it. It's front and center in our lives. Before I start, a little bit about Grey Matters. We're a hospitality design agency primarily based in Singapore and Bangkok, with a focus on hotel interiors, architecture, F&B, and branding. I joined the founder, Alan Barr, about a year ago after spending 30 years in the hotel technical services and strategic development world. Mostly for various large international hotel chains and pretty well exclusively in the Asia Pacific region. This presentation is actually a brief insight into how we are adjusting and looking at various facility aspects and individual zones of hotels. It touches also on some wider perspectives of where hospitality is perhaps going and how we can be better prepared as designers moving forward. Incidentally, our interpretation of paradigm in this context is a pattern for something related to the change. As a general overview, we tasked our designers some weeks ago to sketch and illustrate ideas reflected their own interpretation of the question, the future of hospitality. We have a young, largely local team whose exposure to COVID impact is probably not as severe as many countries, although our office was actually closed officially for 3 months. This first statement is our own take on the seminal nature of this pandemic, how directly and indirectly we'll all be affected either by impact or influence. It's unavoidable. This is about the contents. We gathered many creative ideas collated into 3 major sections, those that are general, those specific to hotel zones themselves, and perhaps the larger scale, more operation and strategic elements to close. We should highlight that there are obviously a wide range of suggestions. Many are short-term fixes associated with team members, immediate segregation, soft adjustments. We later expand on wider impact issues on design spaces. Nobody really knows where or how or perhaps if this will end in our comfortable normality. There's that word. Will different strains create more chaos? Will travel become punitively expensive? For now, however, we can at least try and predict and prepare. Planning. The main thrust of this topic is flexibility and adaptation. Short, medium term, however, owners and developers will likely be looking at inwardly to maximizing existing asset potential. New builds become more distant in most locations. Supply is certainly largely saturated in many Asian destinations, and we can reflect wistfully on the golden years of mass tourism movement, long buffet lines and full hotels. Our feeling, however, is that we have to think outside the conventional box. Multi-purpose.
So can I interrupt you just for a moment, please?
Sure.
Can you go full screen, please, with your presentation?
I'm sorry, yeah. Just working on it, bear with us.
No problem.
Sorry, everybody out there. This will be rectified very soon, hopefully. it just doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, no problem at all. Let's just keep it moving, Nigel. It's
Many
absolutely
apologies
fine.
for that, guys.
No, absolutely fine.
Sorry out there in the big wide world. Okay, so, you know, from a planning point of view, you know, our feeling is we have to think outside the box, multi-purpose, multi-use spaces, gyms which segregate, F&B areas which partition, guest rooms as workspaces, ballrooms and meeting rooms repurposed. All these elements are really, really important to think about. Perhaps a little stretch to believe all surfaces and finishes need to be smooth and wash down ready in the future, but evidence shows that COVID clings to surfaces. Just look at those handles on the left there. Wider applications perhaps apply to the selection of issues like TV remotes, waste bin, handrails, generally items which guests contact and which can be selected in detail more thoughtfully by designers. Perception is reality to guests. A thoughtful balance blending the aesthetic with the practical should always be considered where possible. Technology, a very wide and layered subject which could cover a discussion on its own. Many hotel companies have made incredible strides, but our experience tells us it's still very location, to some extent brand specific. Passports still need to be hand scanned and forms filled in by hand in many countries. Surely the ideal is that your familiar handset phone literally controls everything. Check-in, lifts, doors, TV, AC, curtains, shower temperature, and F&B interface. It needs to happen quicker and it needs to happen universally. We've got full screen. Moving on to sort of lobbies and entrances. Here, the ideas and images perhaps demonstrate immediate and current team member ideas, and overlays to limit contact, apply gel, and segregation are obvious. Being checked in by a dog robot, though, really appeals to the right-hand side there. The second page highlights some key zones in the hotel lobby, how entrances work with security hygiene overlays, perhaps a given now in many locations, and the emphasis on open space and distancing with references to virtual check-ins and even non-contact lift buttons. F&B. In many ways, F&B can be seen as the most likely return to normal facility in hotels, particularly where local external demographics can support hotel F&B offerings in resorts and branded city hotel outlets in particular. How much adjustments will, however, be required to allow customers to feel comfortable and at ease? There is probably no single answer, but obvious spacing and flexible partitioning will play its part. The large buffet troughs in big box hotels and resorts will need to adjust. Queuing up for your breakfast omelette with 10 others can't be the future. Increasing domestic guests' expectations and their cuisine preference and more extensive a la carte service may just be the norm going forwards in many destinations. Meeting and events. Here the impact is significant as both mass travel and crowding typify most large-scale MICE events and hotels, and Bangkok is one of the world's biggest and best. How do hotels compensate for large vacant spaces being unoccupied? And what can a ballroom be used for? How do we design for flexibility and adaptation? There's a tennis court under the chandelier in this particular sketch, or indeed lawn bowls, but these spaces really need careful consideration in the future. And our minds move to smaller, more curated experiential events, exterior and scenic memories enhanced by thoughtful design overlays, both in corporate and leisure spaces. Here, designers can work with hotels to maximize such opportunities. In the recreation spaces, it would seem to us that there are opportunities in many hotel properties to maximize the leisure and recreational spaces. Maybe as meeting facilities suffer, recreation can benefit. We see higher demand for health, wellness, and in some form or other, isolation, spaces allowing individuals or couples to retreat with a view within a property itself. In the short term, however, designers can enlarge gyms, look at rooftops, and coordinate in-room opportunities for guests to exercise, for example, with those kits. In the landscape spaces, most hotels have opportunities to enhance external, in many cases, bright and airy internal zones for guests. Conservatories, winter gardens, pavilions are spacious destination experiences where the internalization of planting and greenery has a calming effect, which in tomorrow's hotels will be a distinct advantage. As with recreation, let's, however, ensure that opportunities exist for guests to find some personal space within the hotel. In guest rooms, again, a topic which could justify a discussion on its own, but fundamentally any room, regardless of segment, design, style, or size, needs to recognize some new design norms. These would include adaptation of simple, functional, and familiar technologies that work and work for everyone. Although seemingly obvious to many, a complex, highly ornate room design can take considerably longer to clean and sanitize over a more simple functional option. A few illustrations here show a monolithic type sink, counter, unit, and curved countertop edges, both minimizing hidden corners and speeding up the cleaning of rooms. Here in the hotel office, we've just sketched a very simple plan showing how a pair of rooms can be converted into a connecting suite, where a properly functional office connects to a private guest room. And many say that city centers will become affected by vacated office spaces, and the work from home and virtual conferencing phenomena becomes the norm. So a suite of this type, or a version of it, could bridge that dual demand for some users where access permits. Cleaning, storage, and maintenance, probably not a very fashionable thing to talk about, but something we all have to consider, and has a great part to play in the inevitable planning adjustments to hotels and ensure that back-of-house functions are compensated and considered. Cleaners and housekeepers will need more larger stores, engineers need to control individual zones, and power water usage more efficiently across all properties. This is influenced at the design stages and planning stages for the designers out there. And sliding screens, for example, don't just divide spaces, they actually can conserve energy. So let me close again by revisiting the need for all of us to consider the notion that hotel spaces need to be more adaptable for the future. Think short, medium, long term. Consider the commercial reality of empty real estate in the city, and probably most critically, how your decisions can create spaces which allow owners and operators to adapt. There are a few examples listed here on the right for you to look at later. And in summary, very quickly, on the macro scale, we've also seen how hotels have adapted to medical isolation and quarantine units in some major cities. Consider this with the wider design teams and the master planning exercises. It's also important as designers to consider mixed or multi-use solutions. How easily and effectively can a hotel room adapt into a studio apartment if required in certain environments? So in closing, let's not lose sight of what we all strive for, in very simple terms, hospitality. Remember, the success and longevity is more likely to now be driven by customer satisfaction and experience, not necessarily the purely mass commercial ends. And finally, the effects of the way which guests choose and use hospitality spaces will change. We as designers need to embrace and adjust to creating much more dynamic, discerning, and diverse environments. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Fantastic stuff. Please stick around. There's a number of questions for you here. And yeah. Particularly as a quick heads up, pertaining to how long kind of the long-term design, the changes now will affect long-term design. Excuse me, Jim Belushi, Bill Barnett. No, sorry, it's not. It's Bill Barnett. He has joined us. I'm sorry, but it's actually not your turn yet, Bill. Keep the sunglasses and the hat on. It's Shelley Reiner. Shelley, Director, Suited Interior Design, joining us from London. Shelley, please, floor is yours. Unmute, please, Shelley. Shelley? Yeah. Unmute, please, Shelley.
There we go. Sorry.
There we go. No problem at all. All yours, please.
Too many things open on the screen. Good morning, everyone. I'm in London, so I say good morning. My name is Shelley Reiner, and I'm the Director of Suited Interior Design. We are a design collective based out of London, and we all have between 12 and 20 years experience in hotels and resorts specifically. And we work all over the globe. And just a small note, we're an officeless firm, so we have always worked remotely. And when this all kind of went down, we didn't really miss a beat. And I've got one of my designers stranded in Barcelona right now, and she's continuing to work. So it's been a really interesting experience for us. And we, when it first happened, I'm speaking specifically about the pandemic, and when the pandemic first happened, I was really inspired by Formula One, who really quickly found a way in the global need for respirators to repurpose a respirator and to make a respirator that got parts off the shelf, could be assembled very quickly, and could be shipped out very quickly. And when I heard that story, I realized that as creative people, we are in a really unique position to provide this type of thinking to the industry, because our industry is going to be in trouble for a while. So we looked at it sort of from a macro perspective. We did 2 case studies in the UK, and we analyzed what the effects of this pandemic would be, both economically on our hospitality industry, and also how it would sort of reshape the real estate of our cities in general. And some of the premises that we are going off of are that travel will become primarily domestic. Large conferencing and MICE events are going to drop off drastically. Airlines are going to need to rejig to start to service domestic travel as well. I think Airbnb will still be there and can continue to compete with the hotel. As we remotely work and as employers' finances shrink, the office space is going to shrink, and there'll be a lot more need for co-working places. And consequence of that will be more need for childcare. Meeting spaces, of course, will shrink. Restaurants, I think they will stay, but there will be a more importance on having outdoor space or secluded environments, secluded and contained environments. And then bigger picture, entertainment, cultural events, fitness venues, all of these industries are suffering and will continue to suffer with reduced foot traffic. So we looked at this from a perspective of how do we change the actual programming in a hotel to give it different spaces that can provide revenue to owners while this adjustment slowly goes back to what we think of as the old hotel model. So the old hotel model, as we see it, are one of 2. There's the business model. You've got a hotel that appeals mostly to large-scale conferencing and meetings, and the rooms support that. Or you've got the leisure model, and the leisure model is typically based on international travel. Somebody's flying in to see a city or visit an area. They use the room, and then they as a gateway to the city, and then they leave. So we really think that those 2 models are actually not going to be economically sustainable for quite some time. So our test cases are focusing on, why isn't it going? Bear with me, I can't get it to go to the next slide for some reason. Sorry, are you, has it just gone away?
I'm afraid we've gone completely blank there, Shelley. Sumi, have you got Shelley's presentation that you can draw up, please?
Let me just get rid of it and see if I can re-get it. Okay, thank you, Sumi.
Fantastic, we're in business.
Yeah, we're in business. Okay, so this is if you could pop up to the first case study, please, Sumi. What it analyzes is a highly dense urban situation. This particular hotel has 900 rooms and is really based on large-scale conferencing. And as I said, I don't know that this was even sustainable to begin with, but it's certainly not going to be sustainable in the future. So if you go down to the next slide, Sumi, we can see that what we've done is repurposed this hotel. We've broken it up so that it has now different income generating types of stay. We've integrated a live-work studio, an apart hotel, long-term residences, and then kept part of the traditional hotel bedroom model. And what we've added onto this, which is quite a critical thing, is what we call the social hub. The social hub we think is so critical because this is what will be integrated into the community. This is what is going to generate revenue from a community standpoint, from a domestic travel standpoint. So the hotel is no longer going to just be used by a traveler. Back up to the other slide if you could. It's going to be used by the community. So the social hub, which is the area that's in the yellow. So if you could go back to the, yeah, thank you. The area that's in the yellow, this is the area that will have an event space in it, but the event space, for example, will no longer be, you know, Axminster carpet and chandeliers. The event space needs to be reconfigured to have hard floors and to be more of a white box so that it can both still do weddings and conferences in the traditional model, but when it's not in use in the traditional model, it can also be used to serve as, say, a museum exhibit, or to partner with the community to have a dance studio in there, or a yoga studio, for example. Same thing with meeting rooms. Meeting rooms will become more flexible so that meeting rooms could potentially also be a private dining area. So it's looking at, and then this also integrates co-working spaces as well, so that the community can come there and they can work there. It will have a creche in it so that their children can be in the hotel, in the social hub while they're working. It's look at really integrating the hotel into the community to make it almost like a mixed-use development in itself, so that there are multiple revenue generation sources rather than just the typical model that we would rely on for revenue. And if you want to go to the next slide, this is our second case study, which is an entirely different type of hotel. This hotel is roadside, suburban. And again, this hotel model really typically would rely on, you know, either an overnight stay going to or from two major gateway cities, or it would rely on business events that cater to a small local industrial park. And if you would pop down to how we reconfigured this hotel to the next slide, you can see what we've done. Again, we're trying to integrate this more into the community. So typically this hotel would have no weekend use really, unless you had somebody staying on their way to someplace else. But by changing their parking lot into an outdoor event space, by changing the pavers simply to be grass pavers, what we've done is created this enormous outdoor event space that you can now use for, say, food truck festivals, or outdoor car raids, or car cinemas. And what that does is it enlivens this hotel and it brings in revenue. It brings in additional event revenue that can make up for the losses that it's going to sustain while the traditional event revenue is much lower than it would normally be. And if you go to the next slide, I can show you some images of what that might look like. So you can see, for example, how you would change you simply change the parking lot to be green and add some greenery, and then you can now have a craft beer festival there, or you can have an outdoor cinema. You can stage events for the children on the weekends. And what we've done is all of a sudden you've got a whole new revenue stream that's coming at the weekends that you never had before. And same thing with the previous slide, or the next slide, sorry. And the next slide shows how an event space can be transformed. So if you imagine, if you look at this picture on the right-hand side, that is what was a traditional ballroom, but rather than having Axminster carpet, it now has polished concrete. And you can dress it up for a wedding very simply by either doing it with images or balloons, and wedding event planners are great at that thing. You can still use it for a traditional conferencing event. But you can see that while these yoga studios, for example, who can't get 50 people in their yoga space anymore, they can now rent this space out for a yoga event or a dance event or a fitness event or whatever the case might be, museum. What this really relies on is a partnership with the community and the hotel to see who it is in their community who has need and has need for bigger spaces, and how the hotel can partner with them for some sort of a economically mutual beneficial partnership. And that's a short synopsis of what we've done. We actually have a longer, more extensive white paper on this, and we're offering it free to anybody in the industry who's interested in it. So please just drop me a line if you'd like it, and I'm happy to send you the full information.
Shelley, thank you.
Thank you.
My goodness, outdoor car race. Love the sound of that. I mean, what a way to repurpose a car park. Bill Barnett, aka Jim Belushi, Blues Brothers. What have you got for us?
What's John Belushi? My God, I've gone blind. Today we're talking about interior spaces, and interior spaces are interesting for me because, oh, there you are. Sorry, you were there. I can see you guys out through. Go back to the other slide, please. Let's discuss about interiors, because interiors is so fascinating. When you stay in a hotel, we get possessed by what a building looks like on the outside, and interiors are what it looks like from the inside. Step inside that front door, because frankly speaking, what was the color of the last hotel you stayed in? Well, I mean, actually, when was the last time you went to a hotel right now with this fucking COVID? But that's interesting for us, because that's why interiors is so it's so important to hotels, imagining these spaces. I think that's so important. So again, it's not necessarily about the exterior. I'm going to offend a lot of architects out there, but these guys who are designing the space that we actually live in, that we remember spaces. This is what's important to hotel guests, and this is where you can make that impression, or you can end up just with another Holiday Inn Express. Sorry, Holiday Inn Express, but okay. When we're talking about where am I, and some of the times when we talk about hotels, we're saying the sense of place. Now, I understand I can go to Thailand, I go to Khao Yai. Am I in the Wild West? Am I in Tuscan villages or other things else? Why can't hotels simply have a sense of place, you know where you are, okay? You know, when we talk about these design elements, have a sense of what you are and where you are. Because frankly speaking, I wake up sometimes when I travel, I don't know where I am. So just, you know, that connection to a sense of place is so important in interior design, and so often we see it gone wrong. You know, again, we understand trying to recreate things, everything else, but a simple sense of place for a hotel, where you're located, celebrating that location, celebrating that culture is so important to hotels. I think that's, you know, just a critical factor. I think something else we also understand is just surviving the crisis. You know, the world is yours right now, and we understand opportunities. I've said it one time, I've said it many times. The ability we have right now with this crisis is to start rethinking what we do and rethinking our spaces and rethinking our hotels. To me, that's a blessing in disguise, because imagines, you know, I don't love buffets. I don't love things like that as well. It's getting rid of those elements in the hotel and saying what's important, what's going to be important to guests when they come back, and adding that personality. So we have the ability over the past 2, 3, 4 months, maybe the rest of the year, who the hell knows, right? We have the ability to rethink our businesses. That's, to me, is the year of imagination, the year of imaginary thinking. I think this is an opportunity. Despite the financial disasters out there, how can we recreate interior spaces? I think what's also important is your neighborhood. It's too often hoteliers, I'm a hotel guy, and I understand, I want to look at my STR set, and I'm going to understand what the Marriotts, what the Accors, what the Hyatts are doing around. What about my neighborhood? What about those hotels that don't come in my STR set? What do people do in my neighborhood? When I look at a business, we start doing analysis, I start to look at my neighbors, you know? If I have a house in a housing estate, I look over the back fence and I say, what are those guys doing over there? It's the same thing in my neighborhood. What are the restaurants doing? What are the unbranded hotels doing? How do you have a sense of that neighborhood, about the culture of that, about the history of that neighborhood as well? And that's what's so important. When you look at, you know, the history of hotels, when you go back to pubs in the 17th, 18th century, those were neighborhood pubs. They celebrated that neighborhood. Why can't we go back into hotels, have a sense of that neighborhood, have a sense of our neighbors around us, rather than trying to create walls between them and with our spaces, celebrate the neighborhood, you know, get back to that basic. Something else which is a big problem for me is imagining interiors, because I don't understand hotel design as an ethos is not very creative. Because when I go and build a hotel, my interior sits there for 5 years, it sits there for 10 years, it sits there. The only time we're going to change is when we have to change it. Now retail, I go to retail, and if I go to the mall or something else, they can change it 3 times a day. They can change it morning, noon, and night. They can create it different seasons. They can recreate spaces. Why can't we do this in hotels? Why can't we have rather than things which are set in stone. You know, it's a, you know, instead of having a living cemetery, have an area where we can recreate during times of day, during seasons, morning, noon, and night, create these experiences. To me, retail, you can learn a lot from retail for hotels because they have imagination spaces and move them around. They're not static. And that's the biggest gripe I have with hotels is static interiors that cannot change. They change every 4 or 5 years. Why can't you do that with hotels and continually to evolve them? I think something when we go forward with technology is understanding artwork and everything else, understanding decorations, how that can be done visually and change and evolve during the time of day, during the month, during the week. You know, that's so important to me. Learn from retail. You know, again, interiors don't just have to be these static things which don't change. They can evolve. We learn that. Common ground is something I hate. One term I hate in hotels is back of house, because back of house means, sorry, it's like a dirty little secret. Too often we say, oh, you know, our staff shouldn't be seen or heard. It's like growing up in a Mormon family or something else. Your kids can't speak back or something else, right? You know, that division between front and the back of the house doesn't exist in a freestanding restaurant. It doesn't extend in most businesses. But the separation of front and back of house and not being seen, to me, makes zero sense. And to me, that's what everything that's wrong about hotels, because it isolates and becomes elitist. It shouldn't be that way, because you should feel you're in a hotel. You should also feel the experience of how the staff evolve and how you see people cooking, how you see people cleaning as well, and not have that separation, front of house and back of house. That's nonsense, right? There's no other business which I see which has these same barriers to design, where they have these set rules. You know, usually design should be free-forming. And something about hotel design, it's too rigid. And it doesn't create these, it creates these false walls which shouldn't be there. I think going backwards, we also like, it's not just about the room. The amount of time, the amount of years of my life I spent with designers talking about guest room design. And there's only so much you can do with 4 walls. At the end of the day, there's other parts of a hotel. You don't spend your entire time in a guest room, but yet we're obsessed by guest rooms. And there's, believe me, there's only, you know, we've seen it all in hotel rooms. They still haven't changed. You know, there's still those 4 walls. There's so much you can do with a bed, but why can't we reinvent the experience, not just about the guest room, but other spaces? They're just as important. They're just as engaging. They're just as memorable for experiences. And usually those are the ones you remember. Who remembers the 4 walls of their hotel room unless it was really great, right? And I think something else we have understood is conservation. We've talked about repurposing. We've talked about renovations and other things. What about conserving the materials? Not just saying we're going to wallpaper over imperfections, we're going to do things, but the conservation movement. We have the Mustang Blue in Bangkok, to me, which is really interesting because it's a conservation project. It's imperfect. And that's something else, you know, life is imperfect too, as we know, after COVID-19. It's a fucking disaster, right? So, I mean, conservation, celebrate what's imperfect in structures and highlight things as well. And, you know, understand a building is a living, breathing mechanism, but celebrate that interiors. You don't need to be perfect, right? It has to have character as well, but try to conserve interiors now. I think that's more important than ever because we're cutting costs. We're saying what's important. Put money where the guest is going to see it, but also understand and conserve what's been there as well. You know, not be wasteful. And redefining interior design. And one thing I hate for hotel projects is another thing. You know, I've got a big hate list right now, but it's when you sit in design meetings where you've got the interior designer, you've got the architect, the signage guys, we've got the graphic designers, we've got technology. What happened to the arts and crafts movement when we go back where designers design furniture, where designers design graphics, where they put the room numbers as well? The craft of interior design needs to be revisited. That's something which is, to me, so important because interior designers are smart people. They can do more than just design the 4 walls of a hotel room, right? You know, let's go back, you know, William Morris, and we go way back looking at arts and crafts moves. Designers were artists. And where's that artistry? And to me, that's the potential of interiors, whereby you're having interiors not just design specific one thing, where they're designing a guest room, but designing everything of the experience. That to me is important because it's dogmatic. Great design is dogmatic. It's not necessarily designed with a group of designers. It's done by somebody's vision, right? Right or wrong, that's the way to get there. And I think the end of the day for COVID-19 is about entrepreneurship. And when you go to an owner now and not just say, what's your budget? It's understanding that saying you're a partner, you're a financial partner. And too often, you know, it's, you know, again, we look at being unaccountable for our clients' work, but now we're going to have to take a broader look and say, where do you spend your money? And you're there to help them. It's not just a dogma where you're saying, oh, you know, what's our budget? How much can we spend? It's saying, where should you put your money? I think that's going to be a good thing because it's rationalizing our business and making us smarter because we're participating with our clients as partners. And that's a great thing. That's what we should be doing all along. That's what we should be doing for a long time. And again, going forward, we're going down the rabbit hole of COVID-19, but this to me is an opportunity to rethink what we do. Interior guys, it's an opportunity for you guys to be craftspeople and artists and encompass a broader experience rather than relying on a set of sub-consultants as well. David?
Thanks, Bill. Inspirational stuff as always. The questions that have been coming in today have been really interesting, and I'm going to get straight into them. And they start with the carpet. There's been a few questions about the carpet. Maybe carpets are coming back, Bill, and that's not a question for you. I'm going to start with Patricia. So what do you do with your gaudy carpet? What do you do, Patricia? What do you do? You need to unmute to answer this question. What do you do with your gaudy carpet? You had one slide which had a extremely gaudy carpet. So what do you do? A lot of the hotels room that are being repurposed and being repositioned and being remodeled, they've got carpets and lots of carpet. What do you do with them?
So first we burn them. No,
No.
I would love to. No, honestly, when you do renovation, depending on how old the hotel is, the carpet always smells. So what we do is we like to approach the floor, like what Bill said just now. Things doesn't need to be permanent. So normally what we do is we introduce a hard flooring, and what we could do on top of it is you have various decorative elements, little carpet, little rugs that allows the room to change. So for example, if there's a soft renovation in 5 years, the owner could just change the carpet that will completely change the look. Change a rug, I'm sorry. So like a loose rug. So we keep the base as hard flooring and then we throw something decorative on top just to change the look. Personally, we like to use a lot of engineered timber or bamboo flooring, things that are a lot more sustainable than other materials.
Sounds great. Thanks, Patricia. Shelley, we're not going to move on from the carpet quite yet because I've got a practical one for you. Also about our beloved carpet. Carpet versus hard floor. Noise reduction implications.
Yeah, well, that is something that needs to be addressed, but there's, multiple ways to do that. Noise reduction becomes about balancing the noise reduction within the room. It doesn't necessarily have to occur at the floor. So you can address it with the walls, you can address it with the ceiling. That being said, there's a lot of other alternatives to carpet that are softer and do have acoustic properties. Rubber flooring, for example. There's some vinyl flooring out there. You can put underlays under a hardwood flooring. There's multiple different technologies out in the market right now that can address the loss of the Axminster carpet.
The Axminster carpet. That's the third time you've mentioned the Axminster carpet. That must be a really nice. It's a very famous brand. We know. Just another quick one is that you talked about remodeling large spaces, which was great, and you talked about social spaces. Isn't this the post-COVID world more of a socially distanced, some of an anti-social sort of a space, but you're saying we're bringing in more social spaces? What is that the right way to go?
Yeah, well, we're looking at it really from a long-term perspective, I think, rather than a social distancing perspective. We know that the social distancing is going to affect the footfall and the revenue of the hotel. But from a long-term perspective, I think people's travel patterns and behaviors are going to change. I think their social patterns and behaviors are going to change. That's all generated from workplace changing radically and from travel changing radically. So we see this as a model that really isn't particularly only about COVID. We see this as a model in which the hotel needs to change in order for it to survive. It needs to be more integrated with the community. And if you think about it, that's how hotels used to be. They used to be integrated with the community. You used to have a chair that was named, Bob's chair, because Bob down the street sat in it every morning at 9 o'clock and had his coffee and read his paper. And we need to go back to that model. Somehow we moved away from it. And I think now it's more critical than ever to go back to that.
Fantastic, thanks, Shelley. Nigel, just I gave you a bit of a heads up before, but you're proposing lots of ideas about post-COVID, and the question is that how much do we really have to change? How much do we really have to change, or is it just going to kind of get back to? I mean, it's like Bill was saying, it's an opportunity to rethink space, and that's great. But how much do we need to change actually because of COVID?
Yeah, that's the big question. Who knows? Who knows how long it will take? Who knows what the impact or the sort of dramatic effects will be in various locations? I mean, here in Thailand, we have this span of very, very different types of properties, from the big box 700-800 room hotels in the middle of cities that run off mice and groups, right the way down to the smaller boutique experiential hotels of 20 keys on a beach somewhere. You know, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a gradual change. I think we'll come back to it, and I think a lot of this will depend on air travel as well. I think at the front end of all this is the significant impact of whether air travel will be more expensive, whether, you know, what we've seen, particularly in this part of the world, is this mass increase over the golden years, the last 10 years, of affordable, accessible bulk travel, which has basically promoted you know, the much larger hotels, the mass movement of people, the tours, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, you know, one of the dangers, and something that I read recently, was about how cities like Venice have turned into commodities, and you know, as opposed to, or Macau have turned into sort of cities from very beautiful original destinations. And much of the sort of integrity of the craftsmanship and the people staying in hotels as opposed to on a cruise ship parked around the corner has had a significant effect on the community. In Venice, I believe the population has dropped by 25% in about 10 to 15 years. So I think part of this will be an adjustment, a natural adjustment, which I don't think is bad, to different ways in which we travel, probably travel less frequently. And as I think I mentioned, you know, I think we all have to focus as designers on a much more experiential and a much more focused set of events where people will be looking for that more focused and a rarer experience in a hotel.
That's great stuff. Thank you, Nigel. That's great. I've got a few more questions to get in. Patricia, over to you. There's another one on the Kimpton. And the questions, it's kind of a practical one, one that Bill sort of alluded to a little bit too, which was about, you know, who's doing what, and the lack of artisans and what have you. But exactly, so the ideas, the key core conceptual ideas, like the gong, for example, does that come from the interior designer, or does that come from the brand management company? Who's it coming from?
For this case, for this instance, the name gong came from the operator. So that's sort of like they're giving different names for different spaces. And then we, you know, like what Bill said, a lot of times is really this collaboration. It's not just us doing the interior design. So we took the name gong, and we made it into, we took inspiration of the gong, and we explored the craftsmanship, the journey to make a gong that influenced our interior design. So for example, we took that, the ceramics that you cast before you make it into an actual gong in metal. So that ceramic, after it's done, the mold is broken, and then that gets tossed away. So instead of just toss that away, we made it into part of the walls. So first, it's sustainable. Second, it sort of go in line with the name of the bar. So I think this kind of, we spin that off and give it a lot more different dimension. And also like the fireplace, the fire pit, how it go in line with the operator's Kimpton cocktail moment. Kimpton cocktail moment is something that we know is part of their brand. But as we are designing the interior, we thought about that, and we try to put the ritual of Kimpton and put it in our interior design to offer guests a truly authentic experience. Number one, being in Kimpton, cocktail hour. Second, the sunset and the fire. So it's a very layered process, if I can say that.
Thanks. No, that's great. Bill Barnett, quick one before we wrap up here. Sustainability. There's been a few questions on sustainability, and I just want to get to this quickly because I know it's a massive topic. But there's been a number of things saying, why have we not really talked about sustainability? 90% of interior designers don't care about sustainability. Do you have anything to say about that?
90% is a big term there. Actually, going back to your carpet, though, one of the best uses that we have for carpet is we actually roll up the dead bodies of clients who don't actually pay their bills in the carpet. So that's what we do down here. But in terms of I think the opportunity of the renovations and repurposing and conservation is that we need to reuse these materials. That's the thing about using quality. That's something I know I know earlier one of our sessions, we were talking to Patrick Keane about the use of bamboo and the use of having these noble materials. If you use good materials in a project to begin with, you can repurpose. I think that goes back to that our ability to use better materials in our projects, not just the cheapest materials, because they can be reused, renovated, and repurposed. I think that comes down to material selection too. It's not just finding cheap things that look good. It's going back to the ethos of noble materials and finding things that can have a long lifespan, but can be repurposed. We can redo cushions, we can redo things. So it's quality versus quantity, in terms of that. That goes back to that ethos. I believe most people want to do the right thing, but they need to also be driven towards that too, rather than just saying, I want to buy new. Well, now we're taking opportunity with a crisis and saying, we want to actually, maybe we should reuse it. So I think, again, this is a great chance to step back.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Bill.
Dave,
Shelley, you want to add to that? Sure.
Yeah, could I add to that really quickly? Because I just wanted to say that I think that this crisis has been an eye-opener for everyone, but this crisis, I think, is a drop in the bucket compared to what we have coming down the road with the environmental crisis. And I really feel it's all of our responsibility to take this time to really rethink how we work and what we specify and how we do business, because we contribute to the downfall of our environment as we continually don't recycle and build unsustainably. So I think it's like on the highest priority level, and I know that the discussion today wasn't about that, but it should be the next one on board.
And it will be. Shelley Reiner, Bill Barnett, and Nigel Harris, Patricia Dedoven, thank you so much for your time today. That's it.
Thank you.
All the best, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.